Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, October 29th, 2019 business meeting of the Olympia City Council. For the record, Council met earlier this evening for a briefing from our hearings examiner. No decisions were made. As well, for the record, we have Councilmember Rollins and Councilmember partially excused this evening. We do have a quorum. At this time, I'd like to have our City Manager, Steve Hall, make a response to a recent item in the news.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Selby. So I'm going to comment briefly about a flyer that the City of Olympia did related to our Transportation Benefit District. If Olympia residents received this in the mail. So this is a flyer intended to educate our public about the city's Transportation Benefit District. We impose a $40 fee on car licenses to pay for our road system in Olympia, and that is about half of our transportation maintenance budget. So recently, the City Council held a public hearing and took testimony about an initiative that would make that money go away. And so the council had a public hearing and afterwards voted unanimously to oppose that initiative. We then produced the staff this flyer. Our intent was to educate the public, let them know about what the consequences were and how we use that money. We have heard in recent days from members of the public that they felt we went too far and that this flyer crossed the line with how the Public Disclosure Commission would allow cities to use public funds. That was not our intent. Our intent was to educate. We felt since the council had a public hearing and took testimony and voted unanimously against the initiative, it was okay to send an informational flyer. Again, some members of the public felt we went too far and violated PDC rules. We're now in conversation with the PDC based on a complaint, so we will work through that process with them and abide by their outcome. I want to say for any of our residents who felt we went too far and were too aggressive, want to apologize for that. This is something that staff did and thought was within the guidelines of the Public Disclosure Commission. So, and I wanted to clear that up, that again, our intent was to notify not to violate any rules, and we will abide by whatever the Public Disclosure Commission tells us we must do. So thank you.
Thank you for that update. Now I'd like to invite Keith Staley, our Director of Community Planning and Development, to talk about the recent weather developments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, members of council. Keith Staley, Community Planning and Development Director here, just to give you a brief update on our cold weather sheltering activities for this week. Hopefully, some of you have heard that a cold weather shelter was stood up on Monday evening and will be open Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday evenings at First Christian Church at 701 Franklin Street. There's about a 50-bed capacity at that facility. Interfaith Works will be staffing that facility and will be prepared to roll over on November 1st when our actual cold weather sheltering season starts. That will run until April 30th. There are contracts in place with the Salvation Army, with Community Youth Services, and with the Family Support Center to provide shelter during that period of time. Unfortunately, our sheltering contracts were not in place for this week, and the calendar and the weather did not line up this year. Cold weather obviously arrived early. We're looking at teens this evening and low 20s and 30s for the remainder of the week. So sheltering will be in place. There will be a total of 114 additional beds added as a result of the cold weather sheltering. And and we have 199 shelter beds existing in the community in a variety of different places. Individuals who are looking for shelter, youth age 25 and less, can go to the Community Youth Services. Family Support Center takes families with children. They have space for 30, and Salvation Army has space for single men and women. A total of 30 spaces are available there. The Union Gospel Mission expands their capacity during cold weather. Also, they add about an additional 15 beds. That brings them up to almost 80 spaces. Additionally, St. Mike's and St. Mike's and Sacred Heart combined to add an additional 14 beds during that same period of time. They do pickups down at the Salvation Army on a nightly basis with a brand new van that they were fortunate enough to acquire. So it's coming together. We're ready to roll. Obviously there continues to be strains in our system. We have somewhere between, at a minimum, 325 unsheltered individuals, and probably really more like 800 to 1,000 unsheltered individuals living in our community right now, in our county right now. So certainly these numbers aren't adequate to house all of them, but last night 46 individuals were able to make their way to First Christian and were able to spend the night in a warm, dry facility with mats being provided by both Salvation Army and Union Gospel Mission. Salvation Army provided additional blankets for that facility as well. Salvation Army received a shipment of 5,000 blankets, and those are available for distribution at varying outlets throughout our county. Places like the mitigation site, for example, they will be able to be distributed there. So unless council has any further questions, I will take leave. And I would like to note that at City Hall, in our lobby, there are red, what appear to be trash cans, but they're donation centers. And we're accepting donations for cold weather clothing, hats, socks, jackets in particular, and those will be distributed to needy individuals in our community.
Thank you, Keith. For clarification, that those red bins are in City Hall lobby, or are they at Olympia Center too, or just the City Hall lobby?
Drop-off locations include Olympia City Hall and Thurston County Health Department at 412 Lily Road.
Oh, sure, the health department on Lily Road. Okay, thank you for that, and thanks also to First Christian Church and Interfaith Works for stepping into the gap this week. So thank you once again. All right, I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have an agenda. Takes us to item 2A, which is special recognition this evening. And I am going to again turn it back to our city manager, Steve Hall, to make a big announcement.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am delighted to introduce Olympia's new fire chief, Mark John. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the process that we went through to select Mark, and also about who he is. So after only 44 years, our former fire chief, Larry Dibble, decided to retire about a year and a half ago. And we were able to have Assistant Chief Greg Wright fill in as acting chief for 15 months. And while we were doing that, we prepared ourselves for finding the new fire chief. And this is a big deal for Olympia. We are very proud of our city and our fire department. The Olympia Fire Department existed actually before the city of Olympia existed. So finding the right leader was critical for our community. And as Mayor Selby is fond of saying, we consider ourselves a talent magnet for the very best in administration. And so we did a nationwide search, and we looked for the very best chief. Mark competed with an applicant pool of nearly 50 individuals from all over the country. We interviewed him in lots of different ways and tested him and decided he was exactly the right fit for our department at the time. Mark comes to us with 35 years of experience in the fire service. He served 26 years with the Anaheim Fire Department, serving as a firefighter, paramedic, fire captain, and battalion chief. He then served as the fire chief in Baker City, Oregon, and most recently, we found him working in the city of Spokane as the deputy chief of operations. Mark is now the head of a 105-member fire department. We have 4 stations, 2 medic units, a battalion unit, a regional fire training center, and we cover a 25-mile service area, square mile service area. So in addition to all those great things, I've learned that Mark is also a water polo player at the international level, right? His team just competed. He wasn't there against Russia in the championship. So he's a pretty remarkable guy, and we're lucky to have him. So please let me introduce Mark John, our new fire chief.
Steve, thank you very much. That's quite a build-up. He made it very clear at our agenda setting meeting the other day that I would be limited to 3 minutes, so I will be brief. I will tell you that I am really, truly just thrilled and honored to be your fire chief for all of the reasons that City Manager Hall indicated. It's an extraordinary city organization. I'm joining an amazing leadership team and a fire department that has a long and extraordinary history of fantastic service. So I'm honored. I'm very excited about what the future holds, and as I've indicated to my staff, who are also remarkable, Olympia is going to lead the way. Olympia Fire Department is going to lead the way. So that's part of our mission, and we will do that to the very best of our ability in serving the community. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you, and welcome aboard. Water polo. Oh, that's pretty feisty stuff, isn't it? That's great. All right, so we have another item of special recognition this evening. That's item 2B. And I would like to invite Leonard Bauer, our Deputy Director of Community Planning and Development, to introduce our new building official.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Deputy Director of Community Planning and Development, Leonard Bauer, and I'm very pleased to introduce Larry Merrill as our building official. I think it's real appropriate that we're doing this the same night as the fire chief was introduced, because this is also a public safety position that isn't often thought of that way. But building official here in Olympia oversees all the review of proposed building plans to make sure they meet all the codes, all the inspections for both building and electrical and plumbing and mechanical and all the systems that go into buildings, all of our code enforcement activities to ensure that our city codes are being met, floodplain administration, and is a key member of the emergency response and management teams here at the city. So it's a very broad role, and I think Larry is exactly the right person for this position. He has 34 years of building and construction experience. He's worked at a number of cities in California, Washington County, and Oregon, and also the UC Irvine campus in California as well. Larry's actually been with the city for a little over 2 years. He was our supervisor for all building inspections for the last 2 years, and again, after a national search, we decided we had the best person right here, and Larry took over as building official in August. So really glad to introduce to the city Larry Merrill as our building official.
Thank you, Leonard. Appreciate that very much. It is an honor. I'm very excited about the position, and I've worked with a lot of different municipalities and have basically seen a lot and worked with a lot of different individuals, and I got to say this department, all the departments that I work with, are top-notch, the best group of people I've worked with in my career. And I am honored to make this the safest and best built and oversee all of the aspects that go with that. I'm committed and dedicated to that. So thank you again, and appreciate the opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Welcome aboard. Any questions? All right. Thank you. All right, that takes us right to item 3, which is public communication or public comment period tonight. And I'll just be brief. We have enough people that we can get everyone in within our first 30 minutes allotted so that the City Council can maintain impartiality and the appearance of fairness in upcoming matters and comply with Washington state law. There's a couple things I want to note, especially it's this time of year, that we cannot allow people to speak regarding opposing or promoting a candidate for public office or a ballot measure. As well, there were 2 other sign-up sheets out there that we had 2 public hearings later on in the business meeting tonight. One is on the preliminary capital facilities plan, and the other one is on the Community Development Block Grant annual report. So if you signed up on this sheet thinking you were signing up for a public hearing, we can move your name onto one of these other lists. With that, I will start. We have a 3-minute countdown clock over my right shoulder. We can stage people here behind the tape so we can expedite folks' time at the at the microphone. I'll start with Jerry Durker, followed by Candy Mercer, followed by Renee Dars.
Hello, my name's Jerry Durker. I live at Cooper Point. I left a copy of the Public Disclosure Commission complaint that I had filed here last year that I had to refile because they lost it. They didn't have their dog eat their homework. They just lost it. So you've got a copy of that, and that'll show you that there is some problems with having the Chamber of Commerce be your lobbyist and be your partner here. One of the problems with being a partner or being a member of the Chamber of Commerce is the conflicts of interest that it sets up in the bidding process for goods and services for contracts. You may have heard about the recent thing about Amazon losing the contract for the cloud stuff for the military to Microsoft, and that there's a big controversy in that because, as it says here, the new Defense Secretary, Mark Esper, at first said he wanted to take several months to review the issue, and then a few days ago had to recuse himself from the bidding because his son worked for IBM. Since President Trump just expressed some quite heavy things about Mr. Bezos and Amazon, and said he didn't want them to get the contract. One of a former head of public affairs at the Pentagon, Price Floyd, who consulted briefly for Amazon, said he thought Trump's vocal criticism of Amazon would give it ample grounds to protest the award of the contract to Microsoft. That's the kinds of things that you'll have with anybody who doesn't have a Chamber of Commerce ticket when you're awarding contracts and stuff. If they do have one, then you're in a conflict of interest. Okay. Two, I'm sorry, Steve, thank you for your little talk about this thing. You guys just made some errors on that, and you went too far. Sorry, speaking again, Cheryl, Ms. Selby, this is
point of order.
Thank you for.
I believe that showing
yes,
political
showing campaign material
propaganda
during public comment is.
Sorry, I won't show the campaign material.
And you can't speak to a campaign or a ballot measure either.
Well, I'm just saying that there was a problem with violation of the Public Disclosure Commission by yourself on Mr. Downing's flyer because sitting elected officials can't give endorsements unless they say they're doing it as a private person. It's a specific requirement of the law. And if you look on the pardon me, it's the
Thank you.
It's the
Thank you. If
right.
you want to submit something by writing, you can still do that with Kelly, our communications director. Thank you so much.
And I will say that, but I just wanted to say
Thank
you might
you,
want
Mr.
to talk
Durker.
to the.
Thank you. We appreciate. All right, I've got Candy Mercer, followed by Renee Dars, followed by Sarah Joseph.
Hi, my name is Candy Mercer, and I just published an article on Medium regarding the 4th Avenue Bridge encampment. I brought a copy and submitted it, and I hope you all get a chance to read it. 2 weeks ago, I came before the council about my visit to the camp and how disorienting it was to me. I found that council meeting to be also disorienting. You need to stop with lecturing us on compassion and disregarding our experiences. You need to move past the simplistic argument that to apply critical thinking to the homeless issue is to be hateful or mean. It's not. We will not solve this problem without intellectual honesty. And I fear your rush to compassion has blinded you to reality. Despite all these demonstrations of compassion, there was no plan in place for this week for emergency shelter because of the cold. If the compassion was working, stick with it, but it's not. I bring two ideas to the council tonight. First, I think we need to de-escalate this situation. One step I've identified is I'm challenging the city to find a way to work with the 4th Avenue Bridge campers to restore the site to the extent possible, given their skills and liability issues. They have indicated they're willing to clean up the potties and paint on the bridge. I think it would go a long way to ease tensions between the community and the campers. It would give the campers a way to give back and show their appreciation and show they want to belong in the community. And it would make the public feel more sympathetic to them, that they are stepping up. I think it could be a win-win-win. Secondly, I'm going to advocate for frequent and friendly police contact, perhaps accompanied with service providers going directly into the camps. This does not seem to be being done. We need to have an idea of actually who is in those camps. No one seems to know except people in the camps. We need to know their demographics and their service needs. We also need the visits to be a check on criminal behavior. Just showing up would put a chill on theft and dealing in the camps. And finally, the response I'm asking from the council tonight, particularly candidate Jones, is to address the concerns the Squaxin brought up in their letter to the council on September 10th, particularly as it pertains to their treaty rights.
Thank you. Renee Dars, followed by Sarah Joseph, followed by Linda Ann Moniz.
Good evening. I'm here, of course, to talk about this. I want to make it clear that myself and people that feel the same as I do, we do not hate the homeless. What we hate is the ongoing mess, the garbage, the human waste, the needles, the aggressiveness, the panhandling, and the fact that they are not being held accountable to the laws when they break them. They're breaking city ordinances every single day. As a homeowner, not only am I unwillingly financing this, but I would be fined for doing the very things that they're doing. Our environment is taking a hit. I see this every day, and I don't know how you people can't see it. Everywhere you go. I live close to the Wheeler encampments, and what I see every single day is heartbreaking. I feel bad for the people. What I would like to see happen is for some of this money that has been spent and we see nothing for that money to be redirected towards rehabilitation. It's come to my attention recently that some of the people under the bridge have claimed that they want to get clean. Why aren't they? What's stopping them? So maybe you could have a meeting about how you can redirect some of the money in that direction, because that's what needs to happen. People are dying. And it's getting hard for me to have a conversation with my grandkids about what's going on. It's horrible. I never thought that this would be our reality. And all I know is what you're doing, what we're doing isn't working. And something needs to happen. Something needs to change. We need to help these people. And I, as a taxpayer, would not object to them going to rehab on my dime. But I do object to putting porta potties in that are being graffitied and giving them and giving them and giving them, and it just never seems to be enough. They continuously want more. We're running out of things to give. So how about we think about how we can really help them and our environment? Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Sarah Joseph, followed by Linda Ann Moniz, followed by Walker Stevens.
Hi there. I'm here to bring up to this council something that has been mentioned here before, cultural humility. So I'll share a little bit of my background. I grew up in Santa Cruz, California. It is known as a very liberal and progressive place, so the politics here are not anathema to me at all. It is what I'm used to. I'm familiar with all the talking points, the sentiments, and I share quite a bit of them. What does concern me about what I see here in Olympia is the arrogance and almost cult-like doubling down in defense of policies that are clearly not working and are in fact harming our community. The enabling that is happening under the guise of compassion and solidarity is misguided at best and politically cynical at worst. If we dare speak out against these failing progressive policies in Olympia, we are labeled bad people, far right-wing chuds, uneducated, and inhumane. I sometimes see this arrogance reflected by some members of this council, whether you intend to or not. I've heard your objections over Como's Seattle is Dying and their other reports, what you may call sensationalistic, simplistic, a faux documentary, are actually full of statistics and actual real statistics and does reflect what the general public is seeing happen in our communities. Maybe a little cultural humility is required on your part to understand average tax-paying middle class and working classes in Olympia. In regard to crime and addiction in Olympia, your far left policies are failing and hurting people. We are justifiably angry, and we are now speaking truth to power, which has been the progressives in this community. And it won't kill you to take a step back and reflect on that. Sometimes the answer isn't a simple one. I've been a registered nurse for many years, and I have a close-up view of human beings of all kinds, all walks of life, and I see them at the worst time of their life. Are they traumatized, mentally ill sometimes, and stressed? They absolutely are. Are they allowed to abuse me with impunity? Absolutely not. To bring this around to the community at large, we are being abused and taken advantage of and then expected to just accept that behavior because they're so traumatized? No. That is not acceptable to us, and it shouldn't be excused and rationalized away with rhetorical tricks and whataboutism. During the last council meeting, I really appreciated hearing about the community court and the success stories. This is a super valuable resource for our community, and I think it's perfect. But another valuable resource is law enforcement, and it's frequently spoken of in our community that the cops' hands are tied. The police are our neighbors, friends, and members of this community too, and they do talk to us. Let them do what is needed with regard to drug possession and dealing, antisocial behaviors, and just simply enforce our laws. We will be a better community for it, and we won't lose our progressive cred. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Ann Moniz, followed by Walker Stevens, followed by Wendy Tanowitz.
A full season has gone by since we have made this council aware of unsanctioned camps and their destructive behaviors. Our sensitive areas and wetlands are still being overrun with humans who have no respect for the community or the land. More rubbish, more syringes, and more human waste pollute our homes. Non-profit organizations can't clean these damaged areas. More encampments have been built while existing camps grow larger. I will remind this council that I have contacted Thurston County Health Department, DNR, Squaxin Tribe, Code Enforcement, Homeless Response Team, and the Department of Ecology. I received the track number from the ERT's coordinator, Jody Goodman, back in June. This number meant nothing. Zach Meyer, who is the shoreline and environmental assistant, spoke to me and said it was above his pay grade to go and investigate the property called the Jungle, though the homeless response team was aware of the situation. I literally cried. I was in disbelief that nobody cared enough to move forward and at least evaluate the situation. Our planet continues to suffer. There will be unforeseen damages. A plan for immediate housing is needed and action needs to be taken. Enforce all rules at the Franklin Street mitigation site. Evaluate the 130 tenants living there. There are people who want resources and they want to feel safe while integrating back into society. Monitor AGHOP while they believe they are doing harm prevention, providing an addict with everything they need to continue being in misery. The only thing they're doing is enabling progressive addiction. And another thing, please stop talking to us like we're not aware of statistics on addiction, mental illness, or the homeless crisis. I've taken the Engage survey in the past. I went to the workshop, and I do appreciate the work that they're doing, but I believe this is taking too long. The 5-year homeless housing plan, for the record, is costing $6.2 million to 22 nonprofit organizations. We have almost depleted our housing funds to buy 2828 Martin Way property. This low-income housing and shelter is needed today, not 2 years from now. People who are addicted will get uncomfortable. Criminals and sex offenders will not be easily identified. I know these things. This is why we need to take action today, not next year, not the next 5 years, today. Thank you.
Thank you. Walker Stevens, followed by Wendy Tanowitz, followed by Nick Schmidt.
Hello, City Council. This is not what I came to speak here about tonight, but I just wanted to say that I live in a van. I'm a person that is considered to be homeless. I keep my space clean. This past Sunday, I was at the jungle helping clean that space, even though that's not where I live. There's a lot of really productive members of our community that experience homelessness. What I did want to talk about today was some work that I do called Ho Ho Hobos. It's a wreath stand. We've been doing it for the last 4 years. Pays homeless people to build and sell wreaths, and it's also organized by homeless folks. And I think it's been a really, really positive program the last 4 years. We've had a lot of success. Last year alone, we employed over 100 people, made several hundred wreaths, and I think make a really ripple impact in the community, not just the direct employment that we provide, but the building community resiliency, building community pride, building things that we can be proud of is really central to what we do. We've always been really small because we're just a little wreath stand, right? And it's never, the problems of homelessness, we're not like making much of a difference in the grand scheme of things, right? So after 4 years of doing this, we want to expand, we want to grow. We designed this little wooden toy. It's like a 3D tic-tac-toe. And I think we can pay people to paint those and sell them. It still engages people creatively, and engages people, giving people a purpose and something to feel really proud of. So we've been doing this for 4 years. We're coming into our 5th season. I think we have the capacity, we have the experience, we've learned a lot. And all we need is a little bit of space to do this in. It's a little bit bigger than we can do in our little stand that we've loved for years. And luckily there's a perfect space. It's publicly owned, it's abandoned. The old Fish and Wildlife building is currently owned by Lot. It's been abandoned for over 10 years. We launched a petition just on Friday. We got a couple hundred signatures in a week just to use this space. It's slated for deconstruction in 2020. It's really silly for me to be here. I actually specifically was trying to talk to Lisa Parsley because she sits on the Lot board, and specifically what we're trying to ask for is to be on the agenda of the Lot meeting on November 13th. It's the board meeting. And we just want to, I contacted Lot and they wrote back and were like, no, you can't do it. And they don't take me or us seriously. I understand we're just kind of a group of homeless people. But we have been doing this work for the last 4 years now, coming into our 5th season. We know what we're doing. We've learned a lot. We have a lot of capacity. We have a lot of community connections. The toy store wants to work with us to sell the toys. We have the capacity to do this. We just don't have the space. This is publicly owned space. It's been abandoned for 10 years. It's slated for deconstruction. It's a much better use of this space to create vibrancy and self-resiliency in our community than for public space to remain locked like it has for the last 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy Tanowitz, followed by Nick Schmidt, followed by Thomas Annie.
Oh, how can I?
You can hand that to Kelly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm here to talk about police issues. 2 months ago, I was at a concert at Traditions, and after it ended, I was standing on Fifth Avenue when 4 police cars raced down the street at 100 miles an hour. I'm not kidding. They were going so fast, it took my breath away. And then after a minute or so, a 5th car came. So I know that high-speed police chases are very dangerous and can lead to deaths and injuries. So I went and filed a public records request to find out how fast they were going and where they were going and what happened when they got there. I was told there's no record, there's no way to tell how fast they were going, which I actually don't believe because there are GPS locations, and if you take the GPS from, Fifth Avenue to some other location, you can tell how fast they were going. It was terrifying. And the previous 2 weeks, there had been a death and an injury in Tumwater as a result of a high-speed police chase. This just kind of segues for me into the fact that police are given liberties that the rest of us aren't. And the fact is, so I asked where they were going, like at 100 miles an hour. So dangerous. They went up Harrison at that speed. They were going to Harrison and I don't know where, some gun thing, I don't know, some mini mart and a gun and da-da-da-da-da. It wasn't even in the paper the next day where they were going, this emergency. But anyway, the cops get a pass. And they got a pass. They get a pass with their budget. I was here many years ago when their budget was up for review. It was just rubber stamped. It was on the consent agenda. One of the biggest parts of the city's budget, and it's on the consent agenda because police just get whatever they want. Which brings me to the case of Yvonne McDonald. Before that, though, I read today that Antoine, I forget his last name, he was shot, a teenager shot by a cop. I'm not sure where. The cop was exonerated. There was a civil trial. It was like black and white, so to speak, that he shot this kid for no reason, and he was exonerated. So now we have the case of Yvonne McDonald. So she's a black woman, and I'm sure that factors into the way her death was treated or not investigated properly. The police had their narrative already cooked up. She did this to herself. However, the bruises and the injuries she sustained caused the workers in the hospital to actually cry. They cried when they saw her. She did not do this to herself. The question is, who did it to her? And when are they going to be identified and brought to justice?
I've got Nick Schmidt, and our last speaker today during public comment is Thomas Annie.
Madam Mayor, thank you. My name is Nick Schmidt, currently a resident of Thurston County. My comments tonight are framed around the Rotarians four-way test. Last part of that test will be beneficial to all concerned. First, I'm a disenfranchised voter, as I mentioned. A fair portion of my life is spent living and working in Olympia, but my residence and my voter registration is in the county, so I have no say in city business except what I'm doing here tonight. I've continually heard from and been approached by people who cannot express at this council chamber about what they feel in terms of what has been termed and what I told to me as compassion fatigue. This city wants action, but a vocal group used that power to provide cover to avoid action in dealing with the situation in our streets. And frankly, I, as well as a lot of members of this community, not only in Olympia, but in Thurston County at large, are tired of this council, and in particular, some of its members, in statement and action, using the situation on our streets to their political advantage. Last time I was here and gave public comment, sat down and found comments by two members of the council addressing what was brought up by myself and multiple members of the community about a year ago, to be very dismissive and political in nature, to continue to go along with their political beliefs. If you want to change things outside of the city's zone of control, as a former basketball coach of mine used to term, go right ahead and run for higher office. But you sit on this council, and at the forefront of your mind should be what you can do to help all Olympians move this city forward. Or we will become like Seattle or San Francisco, a place held up where the balance between the needs of the vulnerable became more important than the health of the city. I say that as someone who's been here, family has been here for 6 generations. I care about this city, and frankly, have seen multiple family members really feel embarrassed by what they've seen the city become. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas Annie.
Thank you. I want to make a point about white supremacy and how it's deeply rooted in all white people. And maybe some of you might be thinking, no, not me. He's not talking to me. Well, I am. I want to take you back to Charles Mitchell Day, which was the last time I was here. For those who weren't here, the city of Olympia decided to honor the story of Olympia's only known slave named Charles Mitchell. And we got to hear some of his story, and part of that story involved James Tilton, who was his slave owner. And I found it interesting that Mr. Tilton was called a lot of things. He was called Surveyor General of Washington State, Adjutant General of Washington National Guard. And these are impressive titles. But I never actually heard him referred to as a slave owner. And I thought that kind of downplayed the significance of that part of his identity. If that wasn't enough, we were also treated to a comment from the speaker about how Charles's life was relatively comfortable until he escaped, that is, at age 13, still a child. A slave, comfortable, that's a pretty racist thing to say, and I don't think that anybody on the council batted an eye at that. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. But overall, in general, the presentation reeked of the benefactor slave owner trope that's very common in the whitewashing of the brutal history of American slavery. I bring all this up not to scold or to shame or to say that Charles Mitchell should not have been honored. He absolutely should. But I want to point out how deeply rooted white supremacy is, so much so that even well-intentioned anti-racist actions by white people can backfire and do more harm than good. This is a dangerous way to view our history, and what good is it to acknowledge past racism if we're only doing it through the lens of whiteness? Doing so can actually be very harmful because it can convince us, that white people, that we have taken a meaningful step when we have not. I can only imagine how insulting it must be to listen to all this pomp and circumstance about setting the record straight about Olympia's racist past, while no one in power lifts a finger to correct Olympia's racist present. You appear to care about correcting racism. Then look at the racism happening right in front of you. Yvonne McDonald was murdered, and city officials aren't even pretending to care. Maybe if you think race isn't factoring into how you've approached this, my hope is that my points could give you cause to at least question that. How is anyone supposed to have faith in this system, to believe in the legitimacy of your power, if you're going to discard the people like this that you're here to serve? I want to thank Councilmember Rollins for at least calling for an independent investigation. We ask that the rest of you follow suit. And we also asked Mayor Selby, I know that Talana has reached out to you. Can you commit to meeting with Talana? That's all I'm done.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment period for this evening. Are there any comments from the dais? All right. Quite a diversity of positions this evening. As a council, it is difficult to sit up here. It's not a perfect process at all because we can't have a dialogue from the dais. We can make comments back. I want to recognize Nick Schmidt from our Rotary Club and his long tenure, his family's long history here as well, and understand that the women in the front row, it takes a lot of courage to show up and speak on an opinion that's not always widely held in this or not opinion, but opinions that are not always heard in our chambers. We are in the middle of a process that is not moving fast enough for anybody. We really do want to have swifter action and action to help our homelessness crisis that treats not just the upstream issues of how people fall into homelessness, which is more of an economic issue, but also the current and then the downstream issues of drug addiction and mental illness. So it's very complex. No surprise that Olympia is, in the county, pretty lonely right now. Every shelter bed that Keith talked about earlier, he said regional, it's downtown. The county has the funding streams to make a big difference around affordable housing and treatment for mental health and treatment for drug addiction. They're moving slower than we would like. So it's come down to us. And I appreciate anybody that came to the public meeting on Saturday at Olympia High School. There's another one coming up this Saturday at Capitol High School. We need to hear from all of you. It's a safe space to come and share opinions around a table with people you may not have met before. We're struggling. We're grappling with this harder than anybody else in this county. Believe me. And this council has been struggling and torn apart over it. This whole community's struggling. I don't have a solution. I don't have a quick answer for you tonight. None of us are satisfied with where we are right now on our response to homelessness, but it just feels really lonely right now as a city. And we need our regional partners, we need our cities, our neighboring cities to understand that we're taking care of their citizens too. So that said, I'm going to go to Councilmember Cooper, followed by Mayor Pro Tem Bateman.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. I just wanted to check in on Walker's request around the workshop space, and particularly to thank you, because I know the vast majority of our houseless population is contributing citizens, and the ones who need extra help are the ones that we need to kind of focus on in how we provide services. But I do wonder if there's an opportunity to check in with one of our executive team about what might be available. And may depend on what kind of an organization you have, whether there's a possibility for the city to help you find space. But I'm pretty sure that the building you're talking about is condemned, and so that would be a reason that you would run into an obstacle asking LOT to provide that space in this winter. That said, there may be other opportunities. So I don't know so Jay Burney will check in with you there. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Bateman.
Thank you. And I'll also mention you can contact Lisa Parsley on her email address or her phone, which are listed on our City Council's website. Thank you for following up on that, Councilmember Cooper. I also wanted to address some of the comments from the women that spoke. I agree that we need to have dialogue, and I agree that we should not be dismissing dissenting or diverse views. And I hear you, I hear your concerns. You discussed a lot of different elements that are impacting our communities surrounding homelessness and the different facets and the symptoms and how we see that in our community. I do want to address a couple things. First, Medicaid coverage does cover inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment, and we had, with our crisis response folks, not our crisis, Familiar Faces program, within 1 month of them starting, they were driving folks to inpatient treatment in Spokane. So we are very much supportive of anyone that wants to get into inpatient or outpatient treatment. We recognize that there are multiple forms that can take. It can be CBT, it can be different types of therapy, talk therapy, not only inpatient substance use disorder treatment. That's one option. We definitely support that, as you saw with our community court program that diverts folks out of that criminal justice system. I think one element that we're finding that is a gap, which is what the gentleman talked about with Walker Stevens, is actual jobs and job creation and providing and helping folks that are unhoused get skills and get a revenue or income. This is an unprecedented situation. I guess if we go back many decades to see this many unhoused folks in our community, it's directly related to the housing crisis. And as a result, we have hundreds of people in our community that are living unsheltered. And when any of us are living outside in the community and doing everything that we do inside of our own homes, in the privacy of our own homes, out on our streets and in our woods, we're going to have public health crises. We're going to have a lot of conflicting interactions with people. We are doing our best with a monumental challenge. That being said, there's always room for improvement. I think we do need to work on accountability measures, ways for us to measure how are we doing, what type of success are we seeing. You are absolutely right to question the investment that we're providing and how are we spending that money and what are we getting out of it. We need to be reevaluating that. We need to take a look at what are the programs that we've instituted? What are we seeing? What are the trends? Is this working? Is it not working? I just want to offer, I know that you have been coming weekly. I would love to meet with you, to talk with you about some of these issues. I don't think you have enough opportunity when you say for 3 minutes up here. I'm sure you have a lot more things to say. And my day job, I work with public health and behavioral health for Medicaid folks. So some of that crosses over into this work. And I'm really interested to hear what types of ideas you have and also plug you into many of the other things that we're doing, not to say that you don't already know of them, because it sounds like you've been doing your work and your homework to find out and get engaged. And lastly, I'll just say, not to dissuade you from coming here and talking to us and giving us your input. The county really, we desperately need folks to step up and give their input. These same voices, and I'd say that to the gentleman that feels like a disenfranchised voter, that the county is, we need folks. We are so, we get such active engagement in Olympia, and that's an asset to us. It helps inform our policy, our decision-making. It helps us identify things that need their gaps in services. Not all of our colleagues in other cities or at the county have that type of engagement. And I know it's a lot of work to come to a meeting at night, so if there's a way that we can help facilitate that, I'd love to do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. I also want to thank the women who came forward this evening. I'm sorry, there are about five of you, I think, who spoke. And I actually want to reflect some of the things that Mayor Selby said, acknowledging that what we're doing is not working at this point. We see an increase in the number of homeless people in our community and no additional capacity in order to respond to the needs of those folks. The situation is actually getting worse. It's not getting better. At this point, we heard a report about the number of shelter beds that are available, even as we set up our cold weather response. The number of beds is a fraction of our current official estimates of how many unsheltered folks there are in Thurston County. I think that the concerns about having accountability on the part of our programs is really critical. Our metrics are not good. We don't have good data. We don't know the magnitude of the problem, for sure. We have estimates. And we don't know that our strategies are working because we don't have metrics that tell us whether our investments or our initiatives are producing fruitful responses. I think we're in this together. There was a discussion at one point that the needs of the vulnerable are being held up above the needs of the city. I actually feel as though that's a false dichotomy. I think that our city is suffering because we have so many vulnerable people in our community. And so I would ask that we not pit one group against another, but instead that we work together in order to deal with a declared emergency, to try to get people into the various forms of treatment or services that meet their individual needs, get them back on their feet, and help deal with what is a serious issue for our community that is impacting all of us. There's serious anxiety within our downtown area and now entering into our neighborhoods. I'm knocking on doors quite a bit these days. Neighbors tell me that they are uncomfortable with encampments and greenbelts. The environmental damage that we heard about this evening is real. These are serious concerns affecting our community, and we have not yet identified the appropriate strategies to deal with it. We've made some emergency responses. We've responded to federal court requirements. But the truth is that most of what we're doing is an emergency response. We are not moving upstream to deal with the root causes of these problems. Instead, we're trying to manage with limited resources. We need help. We need help not just from the county, we need help from the state. We need help from the federal government. This issue is well beyond the capacity of our little town. And yet we must do our best to manage the situation that's before us. And in order to do that, we need to work together, which is nothing new. We've said this repeatedly over the last year and a half, calling upon the community to work with us in order to develop an appropriate response. Is it a dozen public meetings now that we've held and we've listened to our community? It's time for the strategies to come forward. It's time for us as a community to pull together with a common response that recognizes the situation that we're in. The magnitude of the problem is well beyond that there's some failing on the part of homeless individuals. There's a systemic problem that is contributing to the crisis that's playing out in our community. Olympia is a magnet for homeless people. A magnet for homeless people in Thurston County come to Olympia in order to receive services. It is a regional problem, and Olympia is carrying the load. We need to be clear to the community what the actual situation is that we're facing. And so thank you so much for coming forward this evening once again. I don't believe that it's just a matter of compassion fatigue. It's a matter that we don't have a clear strategy on how to deal with the problem that's before us. The onus is upon the City Council and for the community as a whole to come together and find a response to the problem. And so thank you very much for being here. We continue to struggle to find a path forward.
And I will just close the response with reminding people that we are in the middle of drafting a homeless response plan, and you can participate. You can participate by point of order. Can I ask that we have a safe and respectful space for all views right now? And so I am going to remind people that we have a community workshop at Capitol High School this Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Everyone's invited. I know I've seen a lot of these faces there, but I'm also speaking to the viewing audience, and we are going to be coming forward with a homeless response plan in the first quarter of 2020, taking into consideration a lot of what we spoke about tonight. With that, I'm going to move to the next part of our agenda. I need a motion to approve tonight's consent calendar.
So moved.
Second. Any questions, comments, or polls? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have consent calendar, which takes us to item 5A, which is a public hearing this evening on the Community Development Block Grant Program year of 2018. So this is actually kind of a look backwards, right? And I think this is probably one of the last times you'll be giving this report, right, Anna?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Oh, I'm just saying that this will probably be the last time that you'll be reporting on this part of the CDBG program.
Yes, it's one of my nostalgic moments.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor Selby, Olympia City Council, and citizens. Tonight, we're going to be holding a public hearing on the annual report for the Community Development Block Grant Program, one of our small but mighty tools that we use to respond to our community development needs, which includes homelessness, affordable housing, economic opportunity for people. So our program year 2018 concluded at the end of August of this year. We have an odd fiscal year. It starts in, September 1 of the particular year and then runs until August. This past year, we were operating on the first of our 5-year strategy years, and our focus was housing and land acquisition. We also had a fairly large project that canceled, and we'll talk about that, a project that would have expanded our public facilities that would help to respond to the needs of our unsheltered neighbors. But our focus has been housing and land acquisition. This chart of teeny tiny numbers, which is included in the report, which looks like this and can be found online, paper copies here at City Hall and paper copies at the Olympia Library. This explains the activities that we set out to do, how much we allocated, how much we funded, and how many people we served. I'd like to go over a few of the highlights from that program. Probably the most heartfelt accomplishment of this past year is that we helped the Family Support Center buy property that includes a service center that will have co-located services to serve low and moderate income families, as well as raw land upon which they propose to build over 80 housing units for people in Southwest Washington, or Southwest Olympia. In this project, we expended $89,000 from CDBG and another $311,000 from the sunsetted rental rehab program that we have received program income from. When we get it, we can reinvest it. We also spent some of our funds on helping displaced tenants from the Angeles Hotel. There were 29 units, households that were at the Angeles Hotel, a property that we had once made a loan on and had some program income that we could use for tenant assistance. We were only able to reach 23 of those households. There's a variety of reasons, many of them sad, of why we were not able to contact everyone and provide them tenant relocation assistance, but it was a great first try at developing a tenant protection plan, and I know that committees and full council have been engaged in that concept, and hopefully this experience will help to inform public policy around that. We also made some economic development investments. We are finally seeing some progress in our downtown safety program with lighting projects. We got 3 businesses and 1 nonprofit theater lit, both alleys and sidewalk areas. We have another 7 projects that are either underway or soon to be completed. This provides a brighter and more welcoming environment for everybody in our downtown core. These funds were also used for, excuse me, it's hard to see sideways, our economic development business training programs. We had 2 approaches. One was for small businesses, in which we helped 29 small businesses learn how to run their business better, more efficiently, and to create jobs. And the jobs that we created were part of how we qualified the downtown safety program. Excuse me. We also provided funds to Enterprise for Equity, which operates a micro enterprise training program. So basically, we helped startups and small businesses. Enterprise for Equity was able to assist 11 entrepreneurs realize their dreams. We did a couple of social service programs. We funded the Olympia Downtown Ambassadors, who reached over 3,400 people with direct services, referrals, and other kinds of assistance to help them basically negotiate their lives on the streets. We also provided funds to Community Youth Services Rosie's Place, a facility that provides shelter for transition age youth, 18 to 24, but also provides a drop-in center where unsheltered youth can come and have warm meals, get food, grab-and-go food, and get resources, and have a place where they can be where they're welcome. The project that we canceled was the Salvation Army's Day Center Community Kitchen. We allocated $300,000 in last year's program, and we will be coming to you November 12th with what we think are some great ideas for how to reinvest that money. But that project was not able to go forward. The short of it is that Salvation Army was ultimately not willing to take on the regulatory boundaries of working with public funds and wanted to go with private funding. But they are exploring ways to continue that project, and we will have some great opportunities for you to consider for reallocating those funds. So this is a slightly different orientation of I will definitely miss this graphic. We call it the oil spill, but it just shows where, in the cycle of life we know as CDBG, that we are at the time when we are reflecting on what we accomplished. And it's important, especially given some of the testimony this evening, it's important to remember, even with a small amount of money, we invested, or we spent $567,000 in CDBG funds, we make big differences in people's lives. We help them start businesses. We help people survive on the street. We help a nonprofit agency position themselves to develop over 80 units of housing. We accomplish a great deal, and it's important to reflect on that. So this public hearing falls in the middle of a 15-day public comment period. Started October 25th and it ends on November 8th. We have not received any written comments. If we have anybody here this evening to offer public testimony, I think you know by now that you hear a lot from the community when you say what you want to do with the forward looking action plan, but not as much with what we did accomplish. But hopefully we will get some public comments and we will incorporate those into our final report, which will be submitted to HUD on or before November 15th. So this is the time for public comment. People can testify here this evening. They can call the City Council at 360-753-8447. You can email us at cdbg@ci.olympia.wa.us, or you can send letters, good old-fashioned paper letters to the Olympia City Council. And with that, unless there are any questions, I will stand down for public comment.
All right, any questions for Anna? Thank you, Anna. So at this point, I would like to open the public hearing on the Community Development Block Grant Program Year 2018 Action Report, commonly known as the CAPER. CAPER. So we have the same rules as public comments are 3 minutes, countdown clock over my right. I will now open the public hearing. I don't have anybody signed up, but sometimes it's confusing when you're in the lobby of where to sign up. Is there anyone here in the audience who would like to speak during the public hearing for the CDBG CAPER? Is there anybody that would like to speak tonight? All right, I will close the public hearing. Thank you very much. And we will move on to item 5B, which is another public hearing on the preliminary capital facilities plan and 2020-2025 financial plan. So this is kind of different. We're going to be looking forward rather than backwards with this hearing. And with that, I'd like to invite Debbie Sullivan, our Administrative Services Director, to give us the context for what we're going to be having a hearing on. That's great.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. I'm Debbie Sullivan, Administrative Services Director, and on August 13th, I presented you with the preliminary CFP and the 2025 financial plan. And since that time, it has been presented and reviewed by the Planning Commission, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and the Utility Advisory Committee. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on September 16th, and in your packet are letters from the Planning Commission and all three advisory committees. I should have looked for the clicker before I started. Before you open the public hearing, I'll give a brief overview of the CFP, highlight the new projects, and the financial plan. With me tonight is Jennifer Pretty with the Olympia School District, and she will brief you on their updated CFP as well. Rad Cunningham from the Planning Commission, and Brittany Yunker Carlson, the BPAC Chair, are also here tonight to share comments with you. So the Capital Facilities Plan is a chapter in our 20-year comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2014. The Growth Management Act requires us to prepare a 6-year plan, and it has to include specific projects that will realistically be implemented, when they will start, how much they'll cost, and how they will be funded. It is both a funding plan and a financial strategy on how the city will pay for the infrastructure needed by the community and for future growth. Understanding how projects show up in the CFP is confusing, so I want to share a little bit about how it works at a very high level. It starts with the comprehensive plan, which establishes the community's vision and goals. Facility-specific master plans are then developed to implement that vision, and I'll go into this in a little bit more detail in another slide. The comprehensive plan and the master plans are our longer-term plans that guide our work, and every year during this time, the project lists and the master plans, along with the cost estimates, are reviewed and updated so that the CFP is updated and it's staying current and relevant. Then in December, Council adopts both the annual capital budget along with the 6-year CFP and financial plan. So I want to spend a little time talking about the relationship between the master plans and the CFP, because we often hear frustration about the condensed timeline to comment on projects. So to understand the projects in the CFP, you have to start here with the master plans. They're not all required by regulation, but the city invests in them because they are strategically guide our work. What's important about them is that they all look to the comprehensive plan for guidance. They're looking at population growth projections, future land uses, what Olympia values, and our vision for the future. The plans establish goals, strategies, specific projects, along with estimates and a timeline. And staff throughout all of these master plans, and you've experienced it, design robust and extensive public involvement opportunities to help inform the decisions. And this is the best place for people to engage, because these plans directly inform the CFP. And so it can be confusing is that they're all on different cycles. So several master plans are underway or will be starting soon. The wastewater management plan, the transportation master plan, and the regional climate mitigation plan are underway and will be finalized very soon. And it's pretty exciting. Transportation master plan and the regional climate mitigation plan are both new. So future CFPs will reflect the projects that are coming as a result of those planning efforts. The waste resources management plan will wrap up in 2021, and the water system plan will kick off later this year and be adopted in 2022. And finally, parks will kick off their process during that same year. So a lot of people are involved in the development of this plan, and I want to recognize that. The CFP and the master plans are thoroughly reviewed by the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, and the Utility Advisory Committee. The planning commissions, their primary responsibility is to ensure that the CFP is consistent with the other chapters in the comprehensive plan. So basically, does it make the investments that are needed, or are there gaps? And your role is to hold a public hearing, which is happening tonight, deliberate, and ultimately approve both the 2020 capital budget along with the 6-year CFP financial plan. So I'm going to transition now to talk more specifically about the projects and the financial plan. So like I mentioned earlier, it's a 6-year financial document. The first year is our 2020 capital budget, while years 2 through 6 are estimates of future costs. This year, the total capital budget is $26.5 million. $11.5 million is for parks, transportation, and general capital facilities, while nearly $15 million covers the 3 water utility capital projects. So the graph on the right, and you'll see this on all of them, we have a graph that shows the relative proportion of the budget by type of project, and that will be consistent throughout the rest of the presentation. So several revenue sources fund our capital projects. The funding sources in this table are listed from the largest revenue to the least, and broken out by general government revenue and utility revenue. Most of the funding for general government projects like parks and transportations have restrictions, either through regulation or council policy on how it can be used. So for example, the revenue from the Transportation Benefit District can only be used on transportation projects, and the Olympia Metropolitan Park District revenue can only fund park capital projects. The only funding source that is unrestricted and can be used for any project are the CFP general revenues, which is only $1.29 million. On the utility side, the bulk of funding comes from ratepayers, followed by general facility charges and grants. So the 6-year CFP is our financial roadmap, so what specific projects are being planned, how much they'll cost, and how we will pay for it. The total for the 6 years is $156.6 million. Transportation projects total over $49 million during this time frame, followed by drinking water at $26 and storm and surface water at $23 million. Not all of these projects are fully funded, but it's important to have them in our CFP because they're eligible for state and federal grants. So, and our staff is really good at securing grants, so we want to make sure that those projects have the full opportunity to receive them. The top 4 revenue sources over this same 6-year time frame are utility rates, general facility charges, the voted utility tax, and impact fees. And state and federal grants play a major role here. So now I'll transition to some of the projects, just to highlight a few of those. I'll start with parks. Their 2020 capital budget is nearly $4.2 million. Their largest revenue sources come from the Olympia Metropolitan Park District at $1.3 million, followed by voted utility tax, impact fees, and non-voted utility tax. A few of their project highlights are replacing playground equipment at Friendly Grove Park, constructing a multi-use trail through Grass Lake Nature Park, and making ADA improvements at LBA Park. The 2020 capital budget for transportation is slightly over $5 million. Their 2 largest funding sources are real estate excise tax and the Transportation Benefit District, estimated at $1.5 million each. And their project highlights include designing Phones Road and the US 101 West Olympia Access Project, and building pedestrian improvements at 5th and Adams, East Bay Drive, Olympia Avenue, and 26th Avenue. Since I presented the preliminary CFP in August, our revenue estimates have been updated, and we have a bit of good news here. Our real estate excise tax is coming in higher, and we're now projecting an additional $500,000 for the 2020 budget, and we will recommend allocating that to transportation projects in the final. The General Capital Facilities chapter in the CFP covers a wide variety of projects, including grant program that provides funding for permanent supportive housing, repairing and replacing the siding on the Hands-On Children's Museum, and mitigating hazardous trees on city-owned property. And since I presented in August, Council held a study session and heard an update on the building condition assessment, the repair and replacement projects that are going on, and with a particular emphasis on the Public Works Maintenance Center and the Justice Center. So the final will include project pages for both of those campuses, so the Waste Resources Maintenance Center and the Justice Center. So here the funding can get a little confusing. The largest bar chart is the revenue from the home fund sales tax, and again, that money will go 100% to permanent supportive housing. The cable TV tax revenue from the public facility and from the Public Facility District and Maintenance Center rent funds our major repair and replacement program on our 16 city-owned buildings, the hazard tree program, and ADA improvements. So you've heard this before, but I love talking about watching television. So the city started assessing a 6% utility tax on cable TV in 2015, and in 2016 and 17, that new tax generated over $1 million every year. And after peaking in 2017, we're seeing a 6 to 7% drop every year. And this, for 2020, the tax is projected to come in at roughly $860,000, a $240,000 decline. So again, as technology improves and more people switch to watching online programming, we predict continuing to see a decline in this revenue source. So moving on to our utilities, they're funded primarily through rates and general facility charges and grants. The drinking water utility capital budget totals nearly $7.8 million, and a few of their highlights include an Olympia Brewery water source engineering study, seismically retrofitting several reservoirs, and continuing to replace water pipes throughout the city. Nearly a third of the 96 miles of pipe are 40 to 50 years old, with another third older than that, so they have a continuing program every year to go in and make those improvements. The wastewater capital budget is $4,448,000. 2020 wastewater projects address preventive maintenance, rehabilitating old sewer lift stations, and extending the sewer system to support septic system conversions. And finally, the storm and surface water utility is, their capital budget is $2,753,000. This utility is very successful in securing grants and is planning on receiving $991,000 in 2020. And some of their project highlights are stabilizing eroding areas along Black Lake Ditch, designing storm ponds at 4th Avenue Ascension, and retrofitting city streets to improve water quality. So it's important to show how we're advancing our comprehensive plan. So we'd like to organize our projects by focus area because it's easier to see the progress that we're making. And I will go through this quickly. In community health and safety, we are purchasing and designing parks, funding permanent supportive housing, and ensuring our water reservoirs can hold up during an earthquake. In downtown, money is being set aside for long-term maintenance and repair of Percival Landing, and we're investing in transportation, like reconstructing Legion Way and making it easier and safer for pedestrians. In the environment focus area, the city is investing in water quality and stormwater improvements and connecting people to nature by building a trail through Grass Lake Nature Park. Neighborhoods are seeing improvements to their parks with a new spray ground being designed for Lions Park, new playground equipment at Friendly Grove Park, and more bicycle and sidewalk projects being designed and constructed. Infrastructure improvements are key to a strong economy, so it's not surprising to see a lot of projects in this focus area, including investments in the Hands-On Children's Museum, the Washington Center for the Performing Arts, and major investments in our transportation and utility systems. So in summary, the CFP supports the community's vision as embodied in the city's comprehensive plan and represents a balance between building new projects and maintaining our existing infrastructure. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to talk about the Olympia School District, CFP.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Our draft capital facilities plan has been adopted by the District Board of Directors. The capital facilities plan covers 2020 through 2025, and that plan represents the annual statement of the immediate investments that we'll be making that were designed in the master plan. The master plan is a 15-year plan that covers 2010 through 2025. I'm not used to those big years. In 2016, our voters approved a bond for $160 million to begin construction of that master plan, and impact fees play a big part in our ability to address the projects in that plan. Impact fees do vary from year to year, between $500,000 and $800,000, or about 1.5% of our capital investments. So our enrollment is also a big driver of our master plan. Our last enrollment projection was in 2015, and we anticipate investing in an enrollment projection update for 2020. And then we will relook at any capacity projects that we have in our master plan. But for now, the capital facilities plan reflects that we're going to keep going on that master plan. The big projects in the master plan are listed on this slide. We have projects that are capacity related, investments that we need to make because our enrollment growth is taxing the facility. And then we have investments that are not capacity related. For capacity related, our investments at Capitol High School will allow us to serve an additional 112 students. We're also building a performing arts center at Capitol High School. That performing arts center was a big step forward in terms of service to the community, but also to the school. Their space for theater, their space for performing arts was very small. We will also be building it's actually going to turn out to be 21 classrooms at Olympia High School with the ability to more quickly and easily add additional classrooms at a later date. Of that, 4 new science labs are included in that remodel, and we'll be able to serve an additional 235 students at Olympia High School. The third item listed there is the remodel of Centennial and McLean elementary schools. Those schools will each serve about 190 additional students, and they are nearly complete. Centennial badly needs their playground to be completed, but we're getting close, and that's very exciting. Avanti High School will be remodeled now that the administrative center has moved out of that building and serve more students. And then we may build a 6th mini building. A mini building is 10 classrooms. You see them when you drive by Pioneer Elementary School, that separate building. 2 projects that are not directly capacity related are the move of the administrative center, which actually is indirectly capacity related in order to expand Avanti High School, and then the remodel of Roosevelt Elementary School. And that forms the basis of our capital facilities plan. As I said, that plan is adopted. We had a first and second reading on the plan, and we will formally convey that to you in the next couple of days. And then I understand we have more public hearing in the future with regard to impact fees specifically. So I will see you shortly. Do you have any questions for the specifics of our plan?
Ready? Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
And Debbie. Yeah, you're back now, right? We're going to have some comments from...
Yes. Before I invite Rad and Brittany up, I just want to talk a little bit about next steps. So here's a calendar of what's to come over the next 2 months. Now, it says October 31st that public comments are due, and I'd love to have everybody's public comments due on October 31st. But as Jennifer said, we're having another public hearing on November 19th. So how it's going to work is you will be able to take comments tonight. I will also be able to receive those via email and by mail. On November 12th, we'll have a conversation and present proposed utility rates, general facility charges, impact fees that support this document, and then have another public hearing on the 19th where you'll be able to receive comments on this as well. So, and then we get into the budget season with final adoption on December 17th. So here is my email address where people can send comments, mail, hand deliver it here. And with that, I would like to invite Rad Cunningham from the Planning Commission to come up, followed by Brittany.
Good evening, Mayor Selby and members of the council. Thank you for letting us review the capital facilities plan and for accepting our comments tonight. Overall, we really have seen an improvement in the readability of the facilities plan. We'd really like to congratulate the city staff for how much better they're getting at communicating their proposed budget to us. So thank you, Mr. Hall, and your staff and everybody that worked on this. One of our, just point of order, one of our comments was about I-967. Am I allowed to make that? Okay, I'll skip over that one. But overall, we thought that the projects that were selected were implementing the comprehensive plan and some of the major objectives, especially walkability and pedestrian-friendly infrastructure. I think like in the Phones Road project, for example, they did a great job of integrating like pedestrian and bike infrastructure on a corridor that's going to have a lot of truck traffic, and so that couldn't have been easy to do, but they really centered that piece there. So I think, and that was a real theme in the comprehensive plan that we're always looking at. And one of the suggested improvements we had was, you know, when in future comprehensive plans, it would be interesting to see changes in investment in things like pedestrian infrastructure over time. So we know that that's a priority in the comprehensive plan. It's one of the goals, you know, that kind of you see throughout the comprehensive plan. But if you could see how the investment has changed in pedestrian safety, for example, since the comprehensive plan has been passed, that would really help the commission look at this. And we also think it might help citizen engagement on that piece. And we had a few other comments that are in our letter. One of the things we think might be worth investigating is valuing the city does a lot of engagement and volunteer and like leverages a lot of public engagement and volunteerism that isn't valued in the comprehensive plan. But those things do have a value and maybe could be integrated there. And we'd also like to see a little bit more information about the debt service, because we know that whatever is paid in the debt service comes out of what is available to implement the budget, and that's not really clear in the comprehensive plan. And I know it's available elsewhere, but it would be helpful to have it in that document just so that we could kind of see what's being taken off the top before you have the budget available to spend. And with those comments, I'll pass it over to the pedestrian.
Rad, there might be some questions.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
there
Any questions
for Rad? I just have a quick one. I was making notes and then caught your comment that we do a good job of community outreach and bringing input back in, but it's not represented in our comp plan. That's what did I hear that wrong? That we don't have that kind of codified, that piece of the value. The value of volunteerism.
Yeah, so yeah, you do a lot of engagement and there's a lot of volunteerism, and we think that there is value there, but it's not represented in the comprehensive plan. And so you're kind of leveraging partnerships. I think the city does a great job of getting value there that isn't really represented, and I think that might be interesting to kind of experiment with putting a dollar value on that.
So I had a clarification also requested. Are you referring to the capital facilities plan piece of things or the comprehensive plan?
The capital facilities plan.
Okay.
Sorry if I misspoke, but yes.
And then you be careful what you wish for. No more questions.
Are you thinking like the value of, like we know what the value of a volunteer hour is in terms of the investment of volunteer? Yeah, how to quantify it, or what are you alluding to specifically about the value of volunteerism?
I think for example, the value of a volunteer hour, or also the value of a like technical assistance that is donated to the city.
Kind of like in kind from our community kind of thing. Okay.
And I think that also kind of values the engagement from the community members, and not specifically talking about our time as the commission, just trying to make sure that's not what we're trying to promote. But we think there's a lot of volunteerism that goes on in the city of Olympia, which is great, and a lot of leveraging of resources by the city. So,
thanks for that clarification. Did you have any other?
In hearing it, I think there's acknowledging the role of our subject matter experts on our citizen advisory committees. And then when I think of the value, I think we absolutely need to acknowledge that, especially as it relates to the capital facilities plan and the planning commission reviewing that document, which is huge. But then operating budget, I think especially about the financial cost and value of the multitude of advisory committees we have and what that actually contributes, because that's a cost that we're not reflecting currently and isn't there. I don't know what my colleagues think. I would think it would fit more with the operating side than the capital side.
Right. So we'll chew on that one, but thanks for making us think.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Councilmember Jones.
So I just want to compliment the Planning Commission for your comments. Particularly, you're looking forward to the next CFP and your ability to tell us where you think we should be headed as we develop future capital facilities plans. I think you're right that in mapping where facilities improvements are being made will help us communicate better with the community as to where their dollars are being spent. I think the discussion about debt service is right on. I think there's a lot of interest in our community about how much of our capital dollars are actually being used to service debt. You also talked with us about the uncertainty of funding sources, and I think that's been a theme in comments that we've received in the past, that the capital facilities plan seems to include funds that are certain and some that are uncertain, and how those play out in the CFP is somewhat confusing to people. And then finally, your comment about how projects are prioritized. I think all of those are really useful input from the Planning Commission, from your chair, and from the body of the commission as well. So thanks for synthesizing this and making it so simple in your letter for us to hear from you. I really appreciate that you're looking forward as well as looking at this particular document.
Thank you.
All right. Brittany?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Brittany Junker-Carlson. I'm chair of the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Here to give you a little briefing on our letter. As we met as a committee to talk about formulating our letter, we were there were a lot of great things being done on bike and ped infrastructure in the CFP. We didn't have a lot to talk about. We didn't have a lot of complaints. We want to commend you on all the projects, as Rad mentioned, that are in there to fund bike and ped facilities, and we're really excited about that. We do still see that the CFP kind of as a whole, the transportation portion, in our opinion, it's still car-centric, and we want to see more equity across all modes of transportation. Just as a little bit of background, as a committee, we've been working with staff and got a lot of briefings on the development of the Transportation Master Plan, which feeds into the CFP, and as you saw earlier, is still in discussion, under construction, if you will. But we are really excited that that is called out in the CFP, and that there's a lot of elements of the Transportation Master Plan that are data-driven, and we really want to see data-driven decisions that are made in the CFP. And we think that perhaps some of the projects in the current CFP are based on public input, which may come from certain points of the community, people who have access to come down here and to speak or provide input. But data is a really equitable way to look at the city as a whole, and where do we need facilities to be built based on data. So we are really want to be big proponents of that. We love the parks improvements that we saw in, although we're not the Parks Commission, we were really excited about the people-centric parks improvements, the spray grounds. We see the example from Woodruff Park is awesome. It's a great facility. It's really brought a lot of people to that one part of the community, and a lot of people are walking there, riding their bikes there, and so I think we would love to see more kind of take a step back on where we're putting in improvements in Lions Park and that new property on Yum Highway. Really take a good look at how are we going to get people there that are not just driving there in a car? How are we going to get people there safely that are walking there or biking there, taking public transit or using mobility devices to get to these awesome parks that are being built and improvements to the parks. Lastly, in our discussions as a committee, we would really love to see new streets as they're built and streets as they're redesigned be redesigned for lower speeds. Not just having lower speed limits, but being designed to slow traffic down. We think that's very important for the safety of people biking and walking. Also loved that bike corridors are continually supported in the CFP. Thank you. We really would love to see more signage on those bike corridors to get people to different points in the town. Signs on how to get to the library, where to pull off for City Hall, how to get to the new spray ground at Lions Park, for example. And lastly, we think it's important to plan for future mobility devices like e-bikes, the future of e-bikes. They're becoming more and more popular. E-scooters, drone deliveries. I don't know. Is that pedestrian related? I'm not sure. But just thinking about being future minded in those different modes of transportation that might be coming to our city will, I think, be a benefit to us. So thank you very much. And I wanted to give a quick shout out to our staff, Michelle Swanson and Sophie Simpson. Are great and have been great leaders for us as a committee. So thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions for Brittany? All right, Councilmember Gilman, followed by Councilmember Jones.
Thanks for bringing the letter, Brittany. I've also been thinking about this question of letters and public input we get versus the data that, that's our best tool to describe sort of the reality of what's happening out in the community. And I think that it has to be just a little bit more nuanced than taking the data immediately over the sort of either public input or opportunity that comes. It's just a couple of thoughts. One is that the data, we've been having challenges having renter households represented at the same level as homeowner households in surveys and data. And we also, the data points we take tend to emphasize the lives and interests of higher income people. And so finding the right data points. So I think it's important to bring a greater emphasis to the data and the analysis that we're able to do with all the graphic information systems today. That's got to be a more important element, but I think we'll continue to also listen to community outcry and also be open to opportunities. That some of our transportation funding comes because there's some pocket of money that somebody else didn't dibs, and we try to jump on it and then match it up with the most likely. So we actually had that same notion brought up in a work session we had last week, and I've been chewing on this idea about should we be more data-driven in decisions, and I think elevating the use of data is important, but I would be cautious about switching and saying, okay, it's Harrison before Elliott, right? That we'll still continue to consider those situation by situation. So thanks so much for the letter.
Thank you. Councilmember Jones.
Brittany, thanks to you and to your committee. I've really enjoyed watching the committee dig into the Transportation Master Plan. It's, you guys work, and it's fun to watch the energy in those meetings. Debbie introduced the CFP talking about how it's built on these master plans. And at this point, the Transportation Master Plan is not complete. It's not in place. And so the Capital Facilities Plan really doesn't have a master plan to build off of. Mm-hmm. And yet you've been able to bring us useful information and useful comments. And I guess what I would say is I am so excited to look forward to the point where we have a transportation master plan that the CFP can acknowledge and build off of and give us the kind of clear direction that we're looking for as a community as to how these different modes of transportation interact with each other effectively. I also want to just thank you for acknowledging the role that parks are playing in their development in our community and how the meshing of parks and transportation really need to be done in a compatible way and intermeshed with each other. Mm-hmm. Thanks for your letter. Thanks to the work of the committee.
Thank you very much.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you so much. So do we take it back to Debbie, or do I open the hearing? We're good? All right. So at this time, I would like to open the hearing on, the preliminary capital facilities plan and 2020-2025 financial plan. Again, same rules as public comment. You have 3 minutes. I've got a countdown clock over here. I will now open the public hearing. We didn't have anybody sign up, but like I mentioned earlier, it can be kind of confusing out there with all the sign-up forms. So is there anybody here that's inspired now and wants to come forward and speak during our public hearing? Is there anybody that would like to speak on the capital facilities plan and financial plan? All right, we will close the public hearing. I want to remind our listening audience that you have public comments will be open until November 19th. And that, all right. With that, we're going to move forward onto item 6A, and we're going to invite Debbie Sullivan back up to present the 2020 preliminary operating budget. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And as well, we'll be joined by start with our city manager, Steve Hall.
Am I using this clicker? Use that clicker? This clicker? Okay. Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. So we're going to tag team this tonight. Debbie and I are going to make the presentation, and Jay's going to answer all the hard questions. So that's why all three of us are here. So it's a tag team. So I want to thank, you saw earlier the staff wheeling in the budget on a cart. That's to avoid back injuries because there's a lot of information packed into the city operating budget and lots of work that went into it. So we wanted to make sure we took it easy on the staff. So it has been a long process this year. I want to acknowledge the staff who worked on this. We had Nancy Lean and Thomas Donnelly and Joan Lutz. I don't think they've slept since August trying to pull this together. And two of our newer members of the team, Jana and Regina, are also here. So it took a lot of people to put this together. So this is my 30th budget with the city and my last.
And this was a hard one, and I'll get into some of that. But we're proud of what we've put forward as your initial starting point. This is just the starting point. We try and listen throughout the year to the public and the city council about what's most important, and then try and match up our revenues with what's in this document. So we're at the beginning point. This wasn't an easy budget because our revenues are very volatile right now. This is one of the most unusual years I've seen in terms of our sales tax, our private and public utility tax. We've had some really volatility where we've had precipitous drops in sales tax, then big rebounds. So it's been a hard year to project. We know that some of our revenues are leveling off. Some of the things we used to count on, like cable TV, are dropping precipitously. People don't watch cable TV anymore. That's the big revenue for the city. So we know some are flattening out and some we just can't figure out. So we're digging in a lot to try and figure out what's going on. So when you see this budget, you take your first look. We don't expect you've read it all yet. But you'll see that there are no new services without new revenue. So that means there's a very small number of new services. So all those things maybe the public or you were hoping for are probably not in here unless we can identify new revenue or some trade-offs somewhere else. You'll find that there's still a fairly long list of unfunded needs, things coming from the community or departments or council members that would be great to have in the budget that maybe aren't there. And then the other thing that makes this hard is we're being pretty cautious because we're hearing and seeing signs of kind of a looming economic slowdown, both at the federal government, at federal level, state level. So we're seeing some of those same signs in Olympia. So anyhow, with all that, let's talk about what we're going to talk about. And we'll be brief tonight, but we're happy to answer any questions. We don't want to go through all the details when you haven't touched the document yet, but we'll talk about a little background, our budget assumptions, our revenues and expenses, unfunded general fund needs, and consideration of year-end funds. So I guess I went too fast. Background, budget assumptions, general fund revenues, unfunded needs, consideration of year-end. Here we go. So we always start with our comprehensive plan. It's really important. We spent years developing this comprehensive plan. It's a roadmap for what our public says is important. So we always try and connect our budget and our work plans and priorities back to that. So here are the 5 areas of the comprehensive plan that you're very familiar with. Talks about community safety and health, downtown, economy, environment, and neighborhoods. And so we're always working to make sure that these are aligned. And so we're aligning this around Olympia, the capital city. And so this is a chart we show almost every year. But when you look at this, there's some really important stories here that are different, that are changing. So as you think about how to align our budget, I mean, we've got 52,000 people. Median household income's pretty good, around 57,000. Here's one that should alarm us. Average sale of a new home is $331,000. You do the math on an average household income of 56,000. Not a lot of people can afford housing. Then look at, so we're pretty well educated. That's pretty standard for Olympia. But look at this other number, renters. We're now at almost 55% renters. And so that creates some specific issues for us. I think it speaks to housing affordability. It speaks also to engagement. We've talked a lot about how do we talk to people who don't have those long-term ties maybe to the community. Unemployment rate's pretty low, but then the next one's a big deal too. We have 18.4% poverty in the capital city. That's way more than the countywide average of just over 11%. So those numbers, that kind of really describe some of the challenges in our community. And so as we build the budget from year to year, these things will become more important as we think about how to address them and what our role is. So this year, we started out with a public engagement process as every year, and we try and talk to as many people as we can about what's important in our community, what's important in our budget. This year we used our survey tool called Engaged Olympia. We had some 400 different survey responses, about 200 different distinct individuals. We said, what's most important in these 5 areas of the community comprehensive plan, and why is it important? So what they told us is that adequate food and shelter for all Olympians is important, a safe and prepared community, a downtown that is safe and welcoming and vibrant, attractive urban destination, neighborhoods that are safe and welcoming, and Olympia has a stable, thriving economy. So no surprises here, but we take those kind of general thoughts and try and match them up with our budget. So when we look at what services the city provides, here are the gaps that the community identified. And these aren't a surprise either. I won't go through all of them, but Addressing homelessness, well, maybe we'll go quickly. Addressing homelessness, maintaining and growing affordable housing, preparing for climate change, sea level rise, natural disasters. Under downtown, ensuring safe and welcoming spaces, supporting the arts, culture, and heritage, and establishing a business, helping businesses establish and grow. Under neighborhoods, preventing crime and creating more opportunities for walking and biking, which we heard about earlier. And under the economy, more diverse employment opportunities and attracting living wage jobs. So again, as we started looking at our budget, we said these are the gaps our community identified. What does that do for our budget? So when we match that up, here are some new and continuing areas of investment in our budget that you'll see that match up with those things. And I won't go into detail, but as we work our way through the budget process, we can describe some of the changes you'll see around those areas that match up with what our public says we need to do. I won't pretend that it covers everything our public said, but we're making some progress in those areas. So the general fund budget, the city budget in general is $187 million. And that may seem like a surprising number to even those of you who've been on council, because we're presenting the budget differently. We're putting on the table every dollar we have in the city budget this year. You're more familiar in the public with the general fund, which is about $85 million. 186 represents all of our debt service, about $23 million, all of our utilities, about $60 million, and interfund transfers. So this is all the dollars that get used within the city organization. But again, the public's focus is mostly on the general fund, which is about $86 million. As you know, we have 8 city departments, almost 600 employees in the city. We have a new line of business as of 2019, and that is housing and homeless response. So you saw that in the budget in 2019. You'll see that again in 2020. We have 4 utilities. We have, we're kind of unique in a city our size in that we have our own court, we have our own jail, we have a solid waste utility, we have a thriving arts program, and we have much more programming and services than most cities our size. We also have our own fire department, which is becoming rare for cities, and we have a regional training center. So when you think about Olympia as a 52,000 person city, we're much different than most cities of the same size. So let's talk about the budget. What does it look like? It is balanced. That's good. I think that's required by law that we balance it. So we did that. That's why no one slept in August, because we're trying to figure that out. It maintains service levels and programs. So there's no proposed cuts. We've not reduced any programs or services in this budget this year, and that took some work. Any new programs or services that you do see are supported with new revenue. So there's a little extra money in the housing programs you'll see in the final budget. We'll add in the Senate House Bill 1406 money in our housing budget. That's about $330,000. There's a little more money in parks maintenance that you'll see. And then there's a couple others that aren't on here. We had a grant for a social worker in our public defense program. But for the most part, if you see something new, it came with new revenue. Also, we want to reinforce that this was getting to a balanced budget, even without new program service, was challenging. 2021 will be an even more challenging budget. I think, as I mentioned earlier, some of the revenue streams that we've counted on long-term are flattening out or declining. Our expenses don't stop. We'll go into that more. So what are our revenue assumptions for 2020? So under state law, we're allowed 1% increase in our property tax of existing property tax base. So we've included that. We're also allowed to assess taxes on new construction. So this year, there's $107 million worth of new construction in Olympia, which will be taxed next year. And there's also about $500,000 in banked property tax capacity that's included in this budget. We're projecting a sales tax increase of 1.5%, and that's an area we want to dig in more. Why only 1.5, you're saying? And part of it is because of the volatility this year, but we can talk more about that in the future. B&O at 1.6%. State shared revenues on gas and marijuana and other things is flattened out. We had originally planned, number 5 here, we're starting to feel the impacts of all the new parks we bought. We need to put more money into operation and maintenance. We'd originally planned a $300,000 transfer, and we talked to finance about that a couple times. Last night, we talked to finance committee. We may not need to do that. We may have some other resources to use there, but that's a conversation for the budget. And I mentioned the new housing revenue from Substitute House Bill 1406. Also not listed here, we'll talk about it later, is this budget also includes a 1% increase in the city's tax on public utilities, on our own utilities. We're doing that to close a funding gap of about $500,000. So if the council approved that, our tax on our public utilities would go from 10% to 11%. So more to come on that too. The assumptions about expenses, so there's the revenues, then there's expenses. We've got about a 4% overall increase in labor. About half of that is in COLA adjustments. As the council knows, we have 8 bargaining units in the city. Most of them are locked in at CPI, 90% of CPI for next year. We're still working on a couple. The other part of the increase is for benefits and for step increases and other things in our contracts. Our medical insurance for next year is in really good shape. This is the first time I've ever seen 0 in 30 years. So that's good. So we've got really good news there. 0% increase in retirement. We are seeing some significant increase in private utilities. When we built this budget, we were estimating 3%. As you may have seen in the newspaper, recently the Utilities and Transportation Commission approved a 14% increase in gas for gas customers. So for the city, there's a plus and a minus. The minus is we'll have to pay more for our facilities and other places to use gas. On the plus side, we have a tax on gas, so we'll reclaim more on the revenue side. So in all, it's a plus and minus sort of situation. So we'll be adjusting in that area. We also have a proposed from the Utility Advisory Committee about a 2.5% increase in city utility rates. That's before the 1% that staff is proposing to add to that. We have some expenses that are uncontrollable, that are things that that we've committed to, like our labor contracts. So labor and benefits are up in next year's budget. Our baseline fees for maintaining our software, we're a very technology-dependent organization, and there are software fees that go along with that, and upgrade fees, outside agency fees, election costs, and private and city utilities are also expenses that are built into this baseline. I'm just going to briefly touch on operational efficiencies. In your draft budget, you'll see a few pages of these, but every year we want to make sure not only do we just look for more money, or we also want to look for ways to use that money more efficiently. So every year departments are finding ways to more effectively use the dollars we have. There are just a few of those. We put in place a new volunteer management software solution to better track and bring on and off volunteers for the city. We automated our permit and application fees, or payment fee system, so it can be done online in community plan development. We have a new case management product in prosecution probation that allows us to manage all the cases in courts electronically rather than manually. We saved $100,000 the last time we bought a garbage truck by using cooperative purchasing. We've saved $5,500 on cell phones by reviewing our needs. So we're always looking at everything from $100,000 to $10. We're looking for ways to do that. So in your budget book, there's a long list of efficiencies. I want to take us back a little bit to 2019 this year, because we alerted council mid-year that 2019 wasn't looking very well. So we're talking about the 2020 budget, but we had some real trepidation in 2019. So at mid-year, our revenues, some of our major revenues were down. We were looking at a shortfall of about 2%. So in the general fund, that's that $85 million bubble, we were about $1.7 million out of off our projections. So that really worried us. We started digging in as to what was causing it, but we also put in place in the organization a soft hiring freeze, which means if you don't absolutely need a position in the general fund, hang on, don't hire. And also we delayed any non-emergency expenses. So the good news is departments were really able to put on the brakes and save enough money so that we stayed in the black for 2019. Now, we put some extra pressure on our staff and maybe delayed some service delivery, but we're able to do that. At the end of the third quarter, our revenues, so we just got in September numbers, have rebounded. So good news, but we're still working on the explanation of how we got there. And then at this point, we're fairly confident we're on track to meet our projections for 2019. So this is why when I said this has been one of the hardest budgets, I've not seen that kind of volatility from being in sales tax down double digits for 2 months, then flat, then up double digits for 2 months. And it's hard to explain, so we're really digging in on that. The last thing I wanted to share is kind of the big picture of how we got to balancing. So when we got down to the end, we said, how are we going to balance this budget for the council to consider? We had 5 options. we could increase the revenue projections. We could get more optimistic and say, well, let's go for a 3% increase in sales tax, or let's do this. So we didn't feel very confident in that. So that was one option that we put on the table. We could generate new revenue. There's councilmatic authority to raise the municipal utility tax or the B&O tax. We're proposing 1% of municipal utility tax, so we took some of that. We could use savings from this year, and I mentioned departments saved a lot of money. We could use that money to create some of the gap for 2020. So we're proposing to use about $330,000 of this year's savings for next year's baseline. Now that creates a bow wave for you, but we thought that was better than some of the other options, so we took some of that. We could start a program, an effort of cutting and reducing programs and services. And we didn't want to go there because that's a big impact on the community and on staffing, and we wanted to have a larger conversation. If the city's going to shrink back, we need more public engagement before we start doing this. We didn't take that. And just this year, we created a budget stabilization account. It's kind of our rainy day fund, and started putting money in that. And we felt it was too soon to start taking money out of that, so we didn't touch that. So, and you'll see in this budget that we are proposing a 1% increase in the tax on municipal utilities, and we're using a little bit of savings from this year to plug next year, 2020, and then the rest of it balance out. So that's kind of an overview. I'm going to turn it to Debbie now to give you some more details and then come back for questions.
Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about the numbers. So first one is, where does the money come from into the city? So nearly half of the city's revenues, 44% or $77.2 million, come from charges for services like utility rates, permit fees, and parking fees. Then the next largest is tax and licensing. So sales tax this year, we're estimating $23.4 million. That's our largest revenue source in this category, followed by property tax at $15.5 million, utility tax, and business tax at $7.1 million. The other slice that seems a little large this year, that represents interest earnings and bond proceeds and transfers into departments for services. So it's larger this year because we are due to refinance the Parks bond anticipation note for $14 million. So what this does is it recognizes that we're going to get that money in to pay it out. Okay, so that's why that one is up. So you'll see it a little bit on this slide too. So this is where the money goes. So it shows how it's being allocated to the various functions. And no surprise here, Public Works is our largest department. They have the 4 utilities, engineering, the city fleet, the city buildings. So they make up 43% of the expenses, followed by public safety, which includes both fire and police. The administration piece of this pie includes community planning and development, administrative services, general government, municipal court. So in the really tiny slice that says general fund, sub-fund, that includes expenses like the Washington Center Endowment, the Municipal Arts Fund, and the Building Repair and Replacement Fund. But the debt portion here probably seems a little high, but then again, that's that Parks bond anticipation note. Money comes in, money goes out to pay it off, okay? In summary, you know, the general fund is up 4% from 2019. And the bulk of that money that's coming in, 67% or $2.4 million of that new revenue is going to pay for salaries and wages. And the rest of it covers inflationary increases like costs for service and supplies. So I just wanted to share with you what that is. You have $186.9 million, but the general fund is relatively small. This slide is really just to demonstrate where the money comes from. A lot of the departments, 8 departments, get some revenue in from outside, whether it's from utilities or whether it's from recreation fees, permit fees. The fire department provides services for the maintenance of fleet from the other fire departments, so they bring in revenue. They also bring in revenue from their regional training center. So the green bar is the general fund portion by the department, and I think that's purple. Yeah, the purple bar is the program revenue. And you can see that police is almost all the general fund. And I wanted to talk next about the unfunded general fund needs, and I don't know how much detail you want me to go into here, Steve, but we had a long list. I think departments, when they were coming in to present their budgets, they were very thoughtful of what they brought forward. They always are thoughtful, but when you say we're having a tight budget, you know, they were even more thoughtful. So I'm going to start at the top. Administrative services. We have a public defense social worker, a 0.4 FTE that was being requested, and she is in our program now, and that person helps our indigent population connect with services, and we're having great success there. And we didn't know whether we were going to be able to keep her. The request was for $14,200. We recently heard that the Office of Public Defense awarded us a grant, and we are able to keep her. So although it is on this list, we are making progress. I do want to put our financial management system up there, and I'm not being self-serving here, maybe a little bit, but that is a looming need for us as a 1980, we call it green screen system that we are managing. The $250,000 ongoing is what we estimate for a subscription fee. We do not need that this year, but we want to keep it in front of you so that you know that that is a future expense. We estimate that the one-time procurement is about $2.5 million, so more to come on that. Community planning and development, associate planner and a program aide, 2 FTEs, and that is estimated at $185,000. We were working with Keith. We believe that will be funded through the home fund, so that will be covered. The downtown aid unit came to you last year. That's an alternative response unit at $1.2 million. As you remember, we stopped that program because we lost the SAFER grant. So the next ones are about vehicles. The next 2 are about vehicles. We want to be able to transfer those vehicles into our citywide fleet program so that they're paying ongoing amortization onto that so that we don't come to you with one-time expenses on that. OFD Cares, they want to increase the hours for OFD Cares. That's a program where they work with people who frequently call 911 and they connect with them and help them get to other places. Program specialist in the legal department, they're increasing in workload for community court. That is to cover some of those things. The jail alternatives office is also increased hours. This is somebody who also works with the community court population. They want to be able to provide support groups and also do increased assessments. The citizen survey, that was on our list, $25,000, and not very long ago you authorized the use of 2019 council goal money, so that has been covered. And the Capital Lake Deschutes governance project, $50,000, and our plan is to, in this budget, we are putting council goal money at $150,000, so using 2019 to fund that in 2020. The police auditor, $30,000. The climate action implementation, we've been hearing that we want to make progress on that and be able to fund it. We have some ideas on how we might be able to do that in 2020. We're exploring that and more to come on that. And then the last one is a federal lobbyist that I can't speak very eloquently to, so he can. So year-end considerations, although it's a tight budget, we should have some year-end funds because if we don't, it feels irresponsible. But the top things on our list are building repair and replacement, $495,000. Again, funding the budget stabilization reserve, the financial management system, and pavement preservation. So that is food for thought as we go through the budget conversation. A little bit about the schedule. It's a tight schedule this year. This is the same schedule I showed with the CFP, so public hearing on ad valorem tax and this operating budget on November 19th. We will have the very next day a conversation with Finance Committee on balancing the budget balancing on the 26th, and then you can see the rest of the schedule for approval. So with that, did you have any? I just want to thank Steve. I have to do that because this is his last budget, and he has mentored and guided me and given me just great advice in doing this, and I just want to publicly say thank you very, very much. Yeah. And the other thing I want to do is in my staff, They are professional and they are enthusiastic, and they have been working very, very hard to present a budget to you that is easy to understand, that is transparent, and I just want to thank them for that. And I also want to do a shout out for Jessie Turner in Communication Services. She worked with us very hard this year. She helped us redesign the capital facilities plan. We got a lot of comments on it, and she's working with us very hard on the operating budget. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thank you, Debbie.
So we'll take questions. All we know you just got it, and there's plenty more to come. But any or areas that you really want to dig into when you look at this, hey, we really want to dig into this, we can put it on the list to make sure we find time going forward.
I just have one little flag. Go back a couple slides. It was, now I've lost it on my notes. It was the unfunded general fund needs slide under community planning and development, asking for 2 FTEs.
Yes.
And the status was the home fund?
Yeah, so those are 2 FTEs that we're temporarily funding now, by name Casey and Ken. And so we're proposing to keep those. They were hired as temporary positions in 2019. We're proposing, when you see the budget, to use the home fund to continue to fund them in 2020.
With using home fund dollars?
Using home fund dollars. Well, using our homeless response dollars, which is more than the home fund. I think we should clarify that. Home fund is only one. Maybe that's confusing. Home fund is one of the funding sources. There are several others. So maybe our homeless response fund rather than
We're getting the thumbs up from Keith?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that explanation. And Councilmember Cooper?
So just clarify, though, that that's not in what's in front of us, but you have a plan to have it in the final staff recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Good point. All right. Anything at this point? It's a hefty document. Thank you very, very much. And I also want to acknowledge, in my time on council, and just 2 of those years on finance and having, almost 4 years not being on finance, that this is the most easily readable report that I've seen. And so I think it's not just a gift to this council, it's a gift to our community to have something that is so turning the data into infographics, right? Everyone has different learning styles and ways of grasping this information, and the transparency and just the engagement and the engaging presentation is much appreciated. So I know there's a lot of work that went into this. Mayor Pro Tem Bateman.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. Thank you to the staff. Thank you to Debbie and Steve. This is the most user-friendly document that I have seen and the most clearly articulated of our values and how those are actually reflected in our budget. And we've emphasized that up here as a goal, and it's just amazing to see it come to fruition. And I know, because I'm on the finance committee, that staff are so enthusiastic and passionate about being able to demonstrate the value that this incredible city does and how our citizens choose to tax themselves to pay for these vital services and how they connect back with our capital facilities plan and our operating budget. And the emphasis that this council has asked for in terms of community input and feedback. We had a in-person community conversation 2 years ago. This year we did our extensive homelessness response, so we were not able to do that. We did do the online Engage Olympia public participation process for our budget. And when you look at the 2020 budget public engagement gaps, and then prior to that, the priorities that were identified, we're literally doing something on each of those topics. And that, to me, really demonstrates that we're being effective. We have room to grow, but it's really validating to see that what our community does identify as those priorities we are currently working on, so we are on track. I do want to call out that poverty rate for our community. We've seen that grow just since I've been on council, and I was pretty shocked to see that it's almost 20%. We're at 18.4% right now. I think that Manager Steve Hall's comments about the housing crisis and the increased percentage of our renters in our community, we're the only renter majority city in Thurston County. That trend, I think, will continue to grow, and that will change what our community's needs are and some of the issues that come before us. And we continue to try to get more input from renters in our community and get survey results that represent the demographics that our community is comprised of. That continues to be a challenge, not only for our community, but others. But as we look at ways to align the goals of our comprehensive plan in our budget, it's really essential that we do get that feedback. I mentioned this to my colleagues on the Finance Committee yesterday. I spoke to a class at Evergreen on Sunday and mentioned this renter feedback issue, and Professor Amy Gould mentioned laundromats being a really great place to reach out to people where they are. They're going to be there, for a duration of time, and a possible capstone project. So I was able to connect Debbie with Professor Gould, and I think that there's a really great opportunity for us to partner there. And I think as we move forward in the future, really closing that gap and getting more input from those folks. I mean, I know it's a priority. Another issue I saw in Portland, where they have a coalition of neighborhoods similar to ours, and they're actually opening up, and they're calling it a community coalition. And because, historically we get a lot of feedback from property owners, although our neighborhoods are comprised of renters, obviously, as we can see from our demographics. And the continual struggle that we have of getting to renters who can be lifelong members of our community, not necessarily transitioning in and out of our community. We want to get that demographic. So they're opening up their community coalition to organizations that represent those community stakeholders. For instance, having folks like Cielo on our community coalition that could help provide a perspective to the constituents that they serve as a possible voice to help lend more of those community conversations and perspectives. So just food for thought for us as we continue to strive to get representative responses from our community and continue to have progress on this. But wonderful document. I'm looking forward to delving even deeper into it. So thank you, Debbie and staff, for all of your work.
All right. And I guess it's also,
if you're wrapping up, I have a couple comments.
Okay, I was just going to acknowledge that, this is Steve's last budget, and what a legacy that you're leaving for us. And, there's going to be lots of things we'll talk about at the end of the meeting of ways for the community to come and acknowledge your service. But for now, we'll wrap up this.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. And I'll echo that, Steve, and we'll say a lot about you over the course of the next week, so I won't do that right now.
Tonight's not about me.
Not about you,
That's right.
But tonight is about Debbie and her team.
That's right.
And the transition of this budget from Steve Hall's brain to the human resources across the department.
And look how much clearer it is.
And now more people will be able to quote the numbers. So it's phenomenal. And I think I want to lift up a couple of things out of this budget because we had a little bit of a preview last night and had a chance to think about it. The first one is the utility rates. So this is the lowest utility rate increase that I can remember in the time I've been on council at 2.5%. Even with that municipal utility tax, a 3.5% increase on your utilities year over year. We're like at CPI in our rate, and that is amazing to see the utilities get it that fine-tuned and that small of an increase year over year. Last night we had a big discussion though about LOT and how LOT is part of both the utility rates and the general facilities charges, and learned that LOT is going to be doing a study of how they provide services and their costs of services and doing business that will be relevant to our next round of budgeting next year. And so we're really looking forward to that. When we look at the GFC total cost for a new development, LOT is more than a third, or more than a third out of 4 categories. The next thing is this extremely conservative, and I want to just commend Steve and the team for this extremely conservative sales tax projection. I believe that we were projecting 1 or 1.5%. I was going to go back and look, and we'll show a trend line when we do this, when we come back to this. I think that we were getting that kind of an increase during the recession, even year over year. And so to come in this conservative was a little bit, it kind of shook me up a little bit last night, but I think it's really smart given the volatility of where we are this year, that we should keep it low, and then we can look at the trend and readjust for a future budget. Bringing the debt into the pie graph is super significant. Like, to be able to actually see in one place how much we're spending across the city in the operating budget when we make our debt, it just goes towards the readability and the transparency of who we are as an entity. And then, as Mayor Pro Tem Bateman talked about, we were super serious and deliberate about asking and listening to the public. And I think we're getting better and better at every year, to the point where we're organizing our budget documents around the performance indicators that the public helped us set, and in the categories that they've been contributing to over time. And that's hugely significant. And we look forward to sort of the next rendition of next year, when the homeless services plan is kind of built, and now we're looking at other forms of getting involved and having conversations with the public, like we did with that budget focus groups year before this, and like we did with Engage Olympia this year. And so the last comment I have is, as you know, we really like to front load council member requests into the finance committee balancing. So if you have ideas or requests, don't hesitate to get them to Debbie or Jay or Steve or I prior to or on November 19th. So that on the 20th, when the finance committee meets, we can make a informed balancing recommendation back to the council. And I found in my time that keeps us from nickel and diming on a whiteboard or a flip chart in the city council meeting, and gives us a serious product that we've all had a chance to think about. So I just encourage you to do that as soon as you have ideas, and don't be shy. So thank you very much. Thank you to the team.
Thank you as chair of finance committee. This is pretty exciting. And just to wrap up, I want to remind people viewing at home that on November 12th, we will be continuing the budget discussions on utility rates, impact fees, lodging tax, PBIA, and then there'll be a public hearing on November 19th on the ad valorem tax, which is a property tax, and the operating budget and capital facilities plan.
Is that your pen?
Is there anything else at this point?
Just one thing, Debbie mentioned that actually the budget will be online as of tomorrow morning, so the public can go onto our website, find it.
There you go. Yeah, so you can see it online. All right, thank you. Thank you so much. So that concludes the regular programming of our business meeting of the Olympia City Council, and we're going to do council member reports. I'll start with a quick mayor's report. As we mentioned earlier, there was a community outreach event at Olympia High School last Saturday morning regarding our homeless response planning, and there's an additional meeting this Saturday at 9 a.m. at Capitol High School, and we hope to see many of you there. We need everyone's input as well. This is Steve Hall's last Tuesday night meeting, and that is significant for two reasons. That means he still has one more meeting, but it's not on Tuesday night. So I want to acknowledge that. We won't be meeting next Tuesday night because it's an election night. We will be meeting on Monday evening. So for those of you that want to come, we will be having public comment available for folks, but it'll be on Monday evening for our business meeting. And then we have an upcoming community event to recognize the longtime service of Steve Hall, our city manager. And that is going to be held here in council chambers on Wednesday, November 6th at 5:30 p.m. There will be cake. Yes. Yes.
I'll be here then.
Yes, and Steve will be here along with, I'm sure, well, they'll be spilling out onto the streets. The agenda is still kind of being formed, but there won't necessarily be opportunity for everyone to talk because we'd be here until the weekend. But there will be an opportunity for people to leave remembrances. There'll be notes available for folks to do that, or you can bring a card and leave it, and there will be a brief program. But my understanding is that Steve wants to spend most of his time talking one-on-one with people in the audience. So I'll look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 5:30, if not before, on next Monday night. So with that, I'll go to my right, Councilmember Gilman.
Thank you. Last Thursday in the middle of the day, I had the great fortune to attend an event sponsored by the City of Olympia Women's Group. It was a panel discussion featuring local women community leaders. Mm-hmm. And first, for a second shout out for Jessie Turner, she not only rolled in the cart full of budgets tonight, but did an elegant job of leading a full room here in council chambers and facilitating the conversation. We had Captain Monica Alexander, who's now with the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission, Linnea Jablonski, one of our own, who's our new Human Resources Director, Karenza Mabwa from Grub, and Melissa McKee, who is one of our peer navigators with the Familiar Faces. And they each spoke and answered questions about their path as women leaders and how they sought mentorship and how they asked for opportunities. And I found it a really inspiring meeting. So I'm so glad that the women made that happen. The other meeting I wanted to call out was I had 2 meetings last week. I sat in on the 4th Avenue Bridge residents and members of the clergy having a weekly facilitated conversation about how they might engage in self-governance. And I was actually I was really impressed. It moves slowly when you're figuring out consensus around new ideas. And even the notion of consensus sent a couple people over to the library to look up consensus decision-making models and bring them back to the next meeting. And then we followed up with a meeting with members of the executive team and 2 of the clergy and myself talking about, in the short term, what are the absolutes that the city needs to have for this, for the short term going forward under the bridge, and to begin to craft a document that goes back and forth between the residents and the city. And I felt good that process is going also. And it's not the answer, to where they go or how what's next for everybody in town, but it is a step in recognizing the humanity of those folks and having an honest conversation with the people under the bridge in that situation about what do we do next together. And so I very much appreciated the time and energy that staff has put into that.
Thank you for your continued efforts in that area. Councilmember Gilman, is there any questions for him? All right. Councilmember Jones.
Thank you. Just to report on one meeting that happened on October 24th. It was a meeting of the Thurston Climate Mitigation Steering Committee. And I haven't reported on this committee very much, so just some background on that. The structure is that there's a steering committee, and then below that, there are 5 different focus groups that are feeding information in on possible climate responses for Thurston County and for Lacey, Olympia, and Tumwater. And those 5 focus groups focus on building and energy, transportation and land use, agriculture and forestry, solid waste and water, and then one that's a cross-cutting focus group to look at general issues. Those come up to an advisory work group and then are reported to the steering committee. Also, within the city of Olympia, we have an internal cross-departmental climate work group that's advising the city process as well. This was a significant meeting on October 24th. It was the culmination of quite a bit of work, and so it's worthy of just giving it a moment of attention. We've done an extensive public outreach, 15 different public events where information was collected on input on possible climate response. A total of 800 comments collected at those 15 events. In addition to that, there was an online survey where 1,400 individuals within the region commented in the survey process. Coming out of all of that was a suggestion of different actions that we might take as a region in response to climate. 300 individual actions came forward, so unduplicated 300 actions. Now those actions come to the steering committee to sort and sift and select. And so our meeting on the 24th was a discussion of the criteria that we'll use to select actions. And the steering committee did accomplish that. And I just want to share with you the small number of criteria that we'll use. So the first is the reduction potential for greenhouse gases, the first criteria in selecting action. The second is the speed of deployment, the rate at which we actually can see results. The third was our ability to actually manage the outcomes. Is it within our scope of control of local government? And then finally, there was a fourth basket of criteria that was co-benefits, which included things like quality of life impacts, economic benefits, and ecosystem health. And those were grouped together. So the steering committee made their decision. Those are the criteria that we will use to reduce those 300 potential actions. Now, that will go to the consulting team to analyze those potential action items and come back. The steering committee doesn't meet again until January to give the consultants some time to do their work. Our various focus groups will be meeting during that period, though, in order to do their work. So that's the conclusion of my report. I do feel as though significant progress is being made, both in terms of the actual work of the steering committee and the process of the plan, but also the community engagement is just amazing. Our community cares about this initiative and is very much engaged. And that's my report.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. Councilmember Jones, I'm just curious if, and because I didn't hear it, and that doesn't mean it's not there, but how are you accommodating for equity in the criteria?
Equity is one of those co-benefits. I didn't mention it, but it very much is on the list. So thank you for asking that question.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And thanks for your service on that committee. That's a lot of data to distill. All right, Mayor Pro Tem Bateman.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. Just a couple of things. So Finance Committee last night, other than the things you've already heard from earlier during the budget discussion, we had our first meeting with the Utility Advisory Committee under the new liaison system that was set up at our January retreat. And so we had Mike Buffo, the chair of the Utility Advisory Committee, come, and we had a nice discussion with him about kind of where they've been this year and where they're talking about moving next year. Some significant things on their plate are wrestling with the interface between our utilities and our sea level rise planning and our climate change planning as we move forward to having a climate plan. Where is the interface with the utility in those conversations? And they're also really happy with the new process around recruitment for advisory committee members. And then they had a little bit of feedback that I'll pass on to Councilmember Rollins as the chair for that selection as they look for a couple of specific skill sets in the new recruitment. We also talked about a few modifications to development fees, and that there's probably about, I want to say there was 10 or so on the sheet that we were looking at out of all of them, really just kind of adjusting to bring us up. Again, we evaluate them and council sets them regularly, but to bring us up to a total cost recovery of 85% is our goal within our planning, current planning and permitting work that's happening. And then we also looked at the GFCs when we looked at the utility rates. I think I mentioned that earlier. A kind of exciting thing to say and sad at the same time. Today, the fast attack submarine USS Olympia rolled into Bremerton for the last time. The submarine has been around since the early 80s, and there's a lot of people in our community that have a really deep connection to that submarine and to the cruiser USS Olympia, which there's a picture of on the wall out in the lobby. There's a good history of naval vessels named Olympia with those two vessels, and so the kind of next steps for the sub is between now and next spring. The crew will remain on active duty. They will not be deployable, and they'll be working on shutting down the system. So essentially closing down the reactor and getting the fuel rods to the Eastern Washington storage facility. And then sometime in that spring timeframe next year, they'll actually have a decommissioning ceremony. And then the submarine vessel body will transfer to the Department of Defense employees and the contractors who will essentially cut it apart for scrap. And so within that time frame, I think there's a good chance, and there's planning in the works, that we'll see USS Olympia soldiers come to Olympia to do some service projects over the course of the next 6 months or a year. We'll see some opportunities to look at, I've been started talking to Kelly about creating a place in City Hall to have some memorabilia from the USS Olympia. Most of you know the story of the silver from the original cruiser. Well, the silver set that's on the USS Olympia, or was on the USS Olympia, they actually transferred that back to the Navy before they left to come back to Bremerton, was made and forged by Panowitz. And so having some sort of place in the City Hall to display some of that is something that I'd like to have a conversation with you about. And then there's a wealth of different ways. So there was around 30 Los Angeles class submarines that had city names. And quite a few of the cities have installations of the con tower or the tail fin and rudder of the submarine in city parks. And in Texas, in a city recently, they actually created a concrete dome the size and shape of the submarine and put the tail fin on it and the con tower on it, so you have what looks like a full-length submarine coming up out of the grass in a city park.
Can we turn it into a spray pad?
And I think there's a world of possibilities there, and if we decide to engage with the Navy in anything like that, it'll have to be well planned and thought out, and it will involve a huge amount of lift and work by volunteers and the group that supports the City of Olympia. So I think it'll probably, I'm guessing, become maybe part of our parks planning process that's about to launch. Those kinds of things are several years off if you think about how long it takes the federal government to do things when they're not deploying. And then I had a request on November 5th in the morning at 10 a.m. There's a change of command ceremony. And so Captain Ben Self, who's been the commander, and we've kind of built a relationship for almost 3 years now, he'll move on with his family to Japan, and a new commander will come in to supervise the decommissioning. I'm not available to make it, and I have an invitation if anybody's free that morning of the 5th. I think if you let me know this week, we can get the forms to you to be able to get on base, and that would be wonderful if anybody's interested.
I heard that former Mayor Mark Fouch is going.
He will be there. So
Yes.
I've kind of, in the emails, implied that he'll represent us. And then I'm trying to get together with the captain and his family on the weekend prior and give them a gift from me sort of on your behalf. So
Great. Well, thank you for following that whole process of the decommissioning. It's been quite an education for all of us because it doesn't happen very often, right? So thank you.
Well, and what do we get the Navy to name Olympia next?
That's what I'm
the
thinking.
kind of
It's like,
exciting part.
what do we lobby for next, right? So any questions for Councilmember Cooper? I just want to follow up really quickly that you mentioned advisory committee applications. And so I want to tell everybody that applications are available online, and we are accepting those until December 15th at 5 p.m. So if you want to find out more about how the city works, that's a great way to get your feet wet. So advisory committee applications available online. With that, Councilmember. City Manager Steve Hall, what's your report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two quick items for me. One, really good news on sidewalk construction. So just a couple of weeks ago, the City Council awarded a bid for the construction of the 26th Avenue Sidewalk and Water Main project. So that project was identified in 2003 in our sidewalk program, and you awarded the bid 2 weeks ago. Normally it takes the contractor 30, 45 days to mobilize and get ready, but this contractor looked at the sunny weather and mobilized yesterday. So they're out there working. We had to scramble to get the word out to the neighbors. It's actually starting, but a lot of excitement about getting that project done while the sun is out. So that's about a 30-day construction window of 30 working days. So if the weather holds, it could be done sooner, much sooner than we expected. Thing two, this may be my last chance to acknowledge really great work of some of our staff, but I hope it's been obvious over my tenure as city manager that most great ideas from staff don't come from the city manager. So a year or so ago, when Debbie Sullivan and Kelly Brasas approached me and said, we'd like to create a women's group to promote and encourage and help women in this organization go places, I said, sure. I can't tell you how important that's been to our organization, how it has blossomed. Their idea was to start it, but let it spin off on its own. It's become organic. There are different offshoots of it occurring. It has meant so much, not just to the women, but all of our employees, about how this is a chance for Olympia to lead in really putting our effort, where our values are around women in our organization. I'm just really proud. I want to thank Kelly and Debbie for that. And again, that's all I have.
All right. Any questions for our city manager? Oh, come on. All right. So with no further business before the Olympia City Council, we're adjourned.